There is a woman somewhere right now sitting in her car in a parking lot. She is not going anywhere. She pulled in 10 minutes ago, turned off the engine, and she has just been sitting there, staring at nothing, with her hands still on the wheel. She is not sad exactly. She is not angry exactly. She is something that does not have a clean name yet. Something like hollow, something like wrung out, something like she poured every last drop of herself into a cup that someone else drank from. And now she is just the empty container sitting in the parking lot, wondering how she got here again. Maybe that is you. Maybe it is someone you recognize so deeply it feels like looking in a mirror. If you are the kind of person who feels other people's emotions before they say a word, who walks into a room and immediately picks up on who is hurting and who is pretending, who cannot watch someone struggle without wanting to fix it, who apologizes too much and explains yourself too thoroughly, and always make sure the people around you are okay before you check in with yourself, then this is for you. All of this is for you. And I need to tell you something at the very beginning before we go any further. You are not weak. What you carry is not a flaw. The depth with which you feel this world, the way you love, the way you show up, the way you stay when other people would have walked away long ago, that is not your problem. That is your power. The problem is what has been done to that power by people who did not deserve it, and the habits you have built around keeping yourself small so that other people can feel comfortable. That is what we are going to talk about today. Not just what other people do to empaths that eventually makes them vanish, but what you allow, what you normalize, what you mistake for love, for loyalty, for strength, when it is actually slow erasure. Because here is the thing that most people do not understand about empaths. They do not leave loudly. They do not slam doors. They do not send the long, angry message laying out every grievance. What they do is something far quieter and in some ways far more permanent. They just one day stop being there. And by the time the other person notices, the empath has already grieved the relationship, already processed it, already said a quiet goodbye in their own heart, and moved on. The disappearance was not sudden. It was the last step of a very long walk away that began way back, at the moment something inside them broke and nobody noticed. So let us talk about what breaks them. Let us talk about the things, the behaviors, the patterns that a deep feeler simply cannot survive long term. Not because they are fragile, but because they are, more than anyone, allergic to things that are not real. The first thing that quietly destroys an empath is being made to feel like their sensitivity is a problem to be managed. Think about how many times you have been told, in words or in tone or in a look, that you are too much, too sensitive, too emotional, that you read too much into things, that you are overreacting, that you need to calm down, toughen up, not take everything so personally. Think about how many times you softened yourself in response to that, laughed off something that hurt you, apologized for having a reaction, swallowed something whole so that someone else would not have to deal with the discomfort of your realness. Now think about what that does to a person over time. When someone who feels deeply is repeatedly told that their feelings are inconvenient, what happens is not that they feel less. They are not wired for that. What happens instead is they start performing numbness. They start building a version of themselves that is more palatable to the room. They get very, very good at pretending they are fine, and underneath that performance, something cracks. There is a psychological concept called emotional invalidation, and its effects are not minor. Research on long-term emotional invalidation, particularly in relationships and family systems, shows that it is strongly correlated with anxiety, depression, and something called emotional dysregulation, which is a term that basically means a person's internal system becomes so overwhelmed by unexpressed emotion that it starts misfiring. The feelings that were never allowed out start leaking out sideways, as exhaustion, as numbness, as sudden disproportionate grief over small things. But for an empath, there is an added layer. Because empaths do not just feel their own emotions, they absorb the emotions of everyone around them. So imagine being a person who is already carrying the weight of a room, who feels the tension before anyone speaks, who notices the flicker of hurt in someone's eyes before that person even registers it themselves, and then being told that what you feel is not real, that you are making it up, that you are being dramatic. That is not just hurtful, that is gaslighting. And empaths are disproportionately targeted by it, because they already have such a strong drive to doubt themselves, to consider every perspective, to wonder if maybe the other person is right, Their compassion becomes the crowbar that is used to pry them open and rearrange them. Here is what this looks like in real life. It looks like a partner who says, "I never said that," when you know they did. It looks like a friend who calls you too intense when you try to have a real conversation. It looks like a family member who rolls their eyes when you cry and says, "Here we go again." It looks like a coworker who uses your empathy against you, coming to you with every problem, every burden, every crisis, but who is mysteriously unavailable the one time you need something in return. And you stay because you are an empath, because you believe in people, because you can feel somewhere beneath all the dysfunction, the hurt child or the scared person that is driving their behavior. You have endless compassion for the version of them that is struggling, and so you give pass after pass after pass. You make excuse after excuse. You tell yourself they did not mean it. You tell yourself you are being too sensitive because they told you that you were, and part of you believed it. But every single pass you give, there is a part of you that is quietly keeping record. Not to be vindictive, not to build a case, but because your nervous system is tracking the pattern even when your conscious mind is refusing to see it. Your body knows, your gut knows, and one day it will tell your heart, and your heart will finally listen. That is when the empath disappears. Not in anger, in exhaustion, in the quiet, devastating realization that no matter how much they give, no matter how patient they are, no matter how many times they try to explain what they need, the other person is simply not capable of showing up for them. And the empath, who has spent so long tending to other people's emotional gardens, finally looks down and sees that their own has turned to dust. The second thing that drives an empath to disappear is being used as an emotional dumping ground without reciprocity. Now, empaths are natural listeners. They have a gift for holding space. They can sit with your pain in a way that most people cannot, without rushing to fix it, without making it about themselves, without flinching. This is a rare and extraordinary thing to offer another human being, but it is also a thing that certain kinds of people will exploit without even fully realizing they are doing it. You know this dynamic. You have lived it. The friend who calls only when something is wrong in their life, who needs you to be available at 11 p.m., who sends paragraphs of venting and receives your response with a heart emoji, and then pivots to talking about themselves again. The romantic partner who processes every fear and insecurity with you, who relies on you to regulate their emotions, who is comfortable and stable in your presence, but who, when you are struggling, suddenly becomes distant, or changes the subject, or makes you feel like you are burdening them. This is called one-sided emotional labor, and it is one of the most common forms of relationship drain that empaths experience. And here is the thing that makes it complicated. Because empaths are so good at giving, they often do not notice how little they are receiving. They are so focused on the other person's needs that their own needs feel almost theoretical. They tell themselves they do not need much. They tell themselves they are fine. They become the person who others describe as so strong and so together and always there, which sounds like a compliment, but is often just a description of someone who has been trained to be invisible in their own pain. There is a term therapists sometimes use, the identified caretaker. It refers to the person in a family or social system who becomes the designated emotional support for everyone else, often from a very young age. This person learns early that their worth is tied to their usefulness, that they are valued for what they do, not for who they are, that the safest way to be loved is to be needed. Does that land anywhere in you? Because if you grew up as the peacemaker in a chaotic household, if you were the one who always tried to fix the tension between your parents, if you were praised most when you were accommodating and scolded when you had needs of your own, then your nervous system was wired to seek connection through caretaking. It feels natural to you. It feels like love, but it is not love. It is a survival strategy that you have outgrown and do not yet know how to put down. Empaths who have not done this work will give and give and give, and they will mistake the feeling of being needed for the feeling of being loved. And they will wonder why, despite all their giving, they feel so profoundly alone. It is because being needed and being loved are two entirely different things. Being needed means someone wants what you can provide. Being loved means someone wants you, even when you have nothing to offer, even when you are a mess, even when you are needy and uncertain and unable to show up perfectly. The third thing that destroys an empath slowly is the weaponization of their own compassion. This is the one I want you to sit with for a moment, because it is the most painful and the most common. You are compassionate. You see the humanity in almost everyone. You understand that people do hurtful things because they are hurting, that cruelty is usually just unexpressed pain in disguise, that beneath the surface of most difficult behavior is a wound that was never treated. This understanding makes you extraordinary. It also makes you a target, because a person who knows that you will always find a reason to forgive them, who knows that no matter what they do, you will eventually see their pain and lead with empathy, who knows that your default mode is to understand rather than to hold accountable. That person will, consciously or not, use your compassion as a get-out-of-jail-free card, over and over and over. They will hurt you and then be vulnerable with you about their past. They will let you down and then share something tender about their childhood. They will behave badly and then remind you, with a cracked voice or watery eyes, of why they are the way they are. And you will feel your anger soften. You will feel the pivot from your own hurt to their hurt, and you will find yourself comforting the person who just caused you pain. This is not kindness. This is a trap, and you have been walking into it willingly because you do not yet know that understanding someone's pain does not obligate you to accept their behavior. You can have compassion for someone and still hold a boundary. You can love someone and still say, "This is not okay." You can fully believe that they are struggling and still decide that you cannot continue to be the person they struggle on. Empaths often confuse understanding with permission. They think that because they can see why someone does what they do, they have no right to be hurt by it, no right to draw a line, no right to leave. But understanding the source of a wound does not make the wound okay. A person can have a very good reason for swinging a hammer and it still breaks your bones. And here is something else. The people who most consistently weaponize an empath's compassion are rarely growing from it. They are comfortable. Your compassion has allowed them to remain exactly where they are, in their pain, in their patterns, in their avoidance of any real accountability. In a strange and heartbreaking way, by endlessly absorbing their consequences for them, you have been robbing them of the very friction that might have helped them grow. This is not your fault. You were doing what you knew, but it is important to see it clearly. The fourth thing that will make an empath disappear is being chronically unseen in return. Empaths see everyone. They notice when you are tired before you say so. They remember what you said offhandedly 3 months ago and ask about it. They notice the shift in your energy when you walk into a room. They pay attention in a way that most people have never been paid attention to in their lives. And for the people who receive this, it can feel extraordinary, magical even, like finally being known. But here is what almost nobody asks. Who sees the empath? Who notices when they are running on empty? Who pays attention to the small things they carry? Who asks how they are doing and actually waits for the real answer, not just the reflexive "I'm fine"? Who sits with them in their uncertainty without immediately trying to solve it or minimize it? For most empaths, the honest answer is very few people, maybe no one. And after years of seeing everyone and being unseen yourself, something inside you starts to close. Slowly, the way a flower closes at the end of the day, not dramatically, just a slow, quiet folding in of all the parts of you that used to reach outward. You stop volunteering your inner world. You stop sharing the things that matter most to you, because you have shared them enough times to know they will not be held the way you would hold someone else's. You become present and warm on the outside and deeply private on the inside. And that gap between who you are in the room and who you are in the quiet grows wider every year. This is loneliness of the most specific kind. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who need you and still feeling completely, profoundly unseen. Some of the most isolated people on earth are also the most seemingly connected because they are so good at giving attention that nobody ever thinks to ask if they are getting enough of it back. If you have felt this, if you know this specific ache, I want you to hear something. The problem is not that you are too much for people to match. The problem is that you have been choosing people and situations and dynamics that do not require them to try. When you are always the giver, you make it easy for everyone else to be a taker. When you always fill the silence, nobody else ever has to speak first. When you always ask, nobody else ever learns to offer. You have trained the people around you, without meaning to, without knowing it, to underinvest in you, because you are always there to compensate for their absence. And now we have arrived at the hardest truth of this entire conversation, the one I have been building toward from the beginning. If you are an empath who has been slowly disappearing from relationships your whole life, who has been pulling back, retreating, going quiet, going through the motions while something inside you has already left, I want you to ask yourself one question. What have you been waiting for? Because here is what I know about people who feel as deeply as you do. You are not passive. You are not a victim. You are not just a leaf that gets blown around by whoever is nearest. You are a whole person with needs and wants and limits. And the relationships that have hurt you most are not just the story of what other people did to you. They are also the story of what you told yourself you could tolerate, what you convinced yourself was normal, what you kept accepting because the alternative, asking for more, drawing a line, walking away, felt too scary or too selfish or too much like becoming someone you did not recognize. Here is what nobody tells empaths. Your sensitivity is not just a receiver, it is also a compass. It has been pointing at the truth this whole time. When your stomach sank the third time a person broke a promise, that was information. When you felt that specific quiet after being with someone who left you feeling more drained than restored, that was information. When you found yourself rehearsing conversations in your head, preparing for emotional labor before you even walked in the door, that was information. You felt all of it. You knew all of it. And you stayed anyway, because you are loyal, because you believe in people, because you thought that if you just gave a little more, loved a little more patiently, explained yourself a little more clearly, something would shift. But I want to gently, firmly say this. You cannot love someone into treating you with the care you deserve. You cannot explain yourself clearly enough to make someone want to understand you. You cannot be patient enough to heal what they have not decided to heal in themselves. And every day you spend waiting for someone to finally see you the way you see them is a day you are not spending building a life that actually fits who you are. The empath who disappears is not broken. They are finally listening to themselves for the first time. When they go quiet, when they pull back, when they stop texting first, and stop showing up, and stop bending, and finally let the space that was always there become visible. It is not a failure, it is a return. A slow walk back to something essential in themselves that got buried under everyone else's needs. And what I want for you, what I genuinely want with my whole heart for everyone listening to this right now, is that you do not have to wait until you are empty to start turning back toward yourself. You do not have to disappear from every relationship before you learn to require presence in return. You do not have to get to the parking lot, engine off, hands on the wheel, hollow and exhausted, before you decide that you matter as much as everyone you have been pouring yourself into. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to say when something hurts. You are allowed to let people show up for you without immediately shrinking the need so they are more comfortable meeting it. You are allowed to be a lot, to be emotional, to be intense, to take up space with your feelings and your truth and your full, unedited humanity. And the people who cannot handle that, the ones who make you feel like your sensitivity is a burden, the ones who drain you without refilling you, the ones who use your compassion as a loophole, the ones who take and look genuinely confused when you one day have nothing left, those people are not bad people. Most of them are just people who were never required to do better because you always made it so easy for them not to. Let them learn, let them grow, but do not let them grow on your exhaustion. You were not born to be endlessly available to people who are unavailable to you. You were not born to be the emotional backbone of everyone else's life while quietly starving in your own. You were born to feel deeply, yes, but also to be felt deeply in return. There is a version of you that is not smaller and quieter and more careful. There is a version of you that has learned which relationships restore you and which ones drain you and has had the courage to invest accordingly. There is a version of you that no longer accepts you're too sensitive as a verdict, but recognizes it as a warning sign about the person delivering it. There is a version of you that gives generously but not recklessly, that loves wholeheartedly but not self-destructively, that stays, not because leaving feels too scary, but because staying is genuinely where they want to be. That version of you is not someone you have to become, it is someone you have to allow. You do not have to disappear to find peace. You do not have to go quiet to get rest. You do not have to leave before you are seen. You just have to stop handing your energy to people who have never once asked how you are holding up, and start saving some of that extraordinary, rare, world-changing capacity you have to feel for the person who needs it most. You. It has always been you. And maybe that is the thing worth sitting with today. Not what someone else did to make you retreat, but what it would look like to stay, fully present, completely yourself, not shrunk, not performing, not managing anyone else's comfort, just you, whole and unguarded, and finally choosing yourself with the same ferocity with which you have always chosen everyone else. That is where the real story begins.